Hi, I'm Craig, and in this video I want to show you how to use auto body repair filler to repair broken or missing or rotten wood, either inside or outside of a home. Now, the manufacturer of this product and auto body repair shops and chemists may frown on this, but that's too bad because contractors have been using it for decades. I've used it for over 40 years for these purposes. And you know what they say about smiling and frowning, right? Smiling takes 7 muscles, frowning takes 40. So this is just giving them a reason to exercise their face. Okay, I want to clear up one misnomer. Bondo is a trade name. It's called a generic descriptor, like Kleenex or Coca-Cola or Jacuzzi. It's very popular, this brand, so that's why people refer to it. Bondo is actually the trade name. Body Putty is what it is. Okay, either one is correct. Just wanted to clear that up. Well, let me tell you a little bit about this product chemically, and then we can talk about how to use it.
Body Putty is a two-part system called a thermal set plastic. I know that sounds strange, but yes, it is considered a plastic, or it's in the plastics family. It's called thermal because it actually heats up while it's curing, and you can feel that after you've mixed it. It almost gets too hot to the touch sometimes. Its two parts are a resin and a catalyst. Now let's talk about the resin first. The resin is a mixture of fiberglass or polyester, which is probably why it's called a plastic, styrene, and talcum or talc. The polyester acts as an epoxy of sorts, which is what gives the Body Putty its amazing adhesion properties. It actually will adhere to almost anything you put it on. Now, it was designed to adhere to raw or bare steel best, but it will stick to wood. Now, you have to consider, in this video I'm showing you how to use it mostly on wood, and wood is an organic material which will swell and contract or shrink with the changes in room temperature and moisture, and Body Putty does not. So I'll show you some techniques later in the video of how you can actually anchor it to the wood. The styrene is the main solvent to keep the mixture fluid, and fumes from this and other ingredients in the Body Putty are very dangerous to your health. So you should ventilate the work area, wear a respirator, and don't touch it with your bare skin while it's wet. The talc helps the mixture flow smoothly. Okay, now let's talk about the catalyst, which is the second part of the two-part system. The catalyst or hardener is MEK peroxide, which is also known as methyl ethyl ketone. Now this is also a very, very dangerous ingredient. Remember, ventilate the work area. Don't let children be around when you're using it. Wear a respirator, wear gloves, take whatever precautions that you seem to find necessary. Now the color of this hardener may vary from either a red to a white or a bluish gray. So if you happen to run out of the hardener that it came with, don't worry if the hardener that you buy to finish up the resin is a different color. That doesn't matter. As long as it says it's for Body Putty, that's fine. So when you buy the Body Putty, it does come with its own hardener, but the hardener is a much smaller portion the way you mix the two, which I'll talk about later. So if you do have to buy more hardener or catalyst, don't worry about the color. That's irrelevant as long as it says it is for Body Putty. Now they say when you're mixing Body Putty not to mix it on wood or cardboard or any kind of paper, because any porous surface can absorb the solvent and throw off the ratio. I don't get that technical about it. If I have a slab of wood around the shop, I'll just use that. It's preferable to mix it on a piece of glass or metal so that that doesn't occur. I'm not that worried about that, but whatever you think is best. I just wanted to throw that out there because the manufacturer does say that. Okay, so before mixing, you want to take the tube, the small tube of hardener, and knead it just a little bit with the cap on. Just mix it around because the two ingredients in there will separate. Okay, the best temperature to use Body Putty is between 70 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Any temperature below 64 could retard the curing process to hours or even days the colder it gets. Now when mixing, too much hardener will cause the product to become too hard or even crack, become brittle. Too little hardener could delay or retard the curing process also to even indefinitely. So the ratio of filler should be roughly a golf ball size of resin to maybe a 1-inch long line or dime size of hardener, because the hardener comes out of a tube. You could run it out to 1-inch long or to a dime size. And if you double the golf ball, you'll double the dime size hardener. Okay, now again, the manufacturer's suggestions when using body putty are always grind the paint off the car so that you're exposing raw or bare steel so that it can stick to it, because they say it will only stick to raw steel. I know differently, but that's what the manufacturer says. Also, they tell you not to apply it more than 1/4 of an inch thick. Okay, so we're about to break both of these rules and exercise some more faces. Now, I've used it over 1 inch thick with no problems, and in many cases you'll find in wood repairs you're going to need to do it that thick. You don't have that ability to pull a dent out like you would in a car so that you're only using it 1/4 of an inch thick. You may have a chunk of wood missing that's 1 inch or even thicker. So whatever you've got to use it for, don't sweat that. But I just did want to throw that out there so you know what the manufacturer is saying. Okay, it does have excellent adhesion properties, as I mentioned earlier, but because it is a polyester product, it does like to stick to inert or products like steel, which don't have movement. Now we're going to give it a little extra help to adhere to the wood because of that movement by using any metal object like a staple or a small finishing nail or even a screw, depending upon how much wood is missing and what kind of space we have to work with. Now it will adhere to itself as well, so if you don't get it the right amount in the first coat and you've got to apply a second or even a third coat, that's fine. Or if you find that there are small little air holes or air pockets and you need to coat it again to get it perfectly smooth, it will stick to itself as well. Now if there's any leftover after you've mixed it, just throw it away. Don't even think about trying to use it because it will harden up on you.
Okay, so the main reasons that I like to use body filler over wood or solvent-based wood fillers are cost and time. Auto body filler hardens in minutes. It's readily available, it's easy to shape, it's easy to sand, you can paint it, you can stain it, you can do most anything to it that you can do to wood. It does take stain a little differently than wood, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but you have to work with it to get the right color. But as far as getting the filler in, shaping it, you can't beat it for time, and time is money. Also, to replace this entire piece of casing, because this is blown out and there's a barrel bolt chisel hole, I'll show you that later, also would be much more expensive, and it would be much more intense process. You'd have to take this piece off, you'd have to find this right profile, which you can't get on the shelf. You may have to have it made, which would be cost prohibitive. Then you have to prime it, paint it, cut it, install it. Whereas this, we can just fill what's here and move on. Okay, so here we have a very typical damaged spot where the jam was blown out. It looks like somebody wanted in real badly, and whoever was in wanted to be left alone. Not really sure, but the first thing we'll have to do is take this strike plate off, and then we can prep the surface. So I'll show you how that's done.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to use screws to anchor this body putty to that missing chunk right there. So I'm pre-drilling so that I don't split the wood, and as you notice, I like to do the screws at opposing angles so the axis of strength is kind of working together there. It can't pull out, in other words. I'm going to put a screw wherever there's a low enough void to accept the head of the screw, and I'm going to leave the head of the screw stick out just a little bit so that the body putty can actually grab onto that head. It kind of acts as rebar in concrete would. Now you'll notice I'm trying to avoid the keeper hole so that the door can actually operate. When I drill that out, I won't hit it with my drill bit. You're leaving the head stick out just a little bit, and that's your keeper hole. You want to make sure that those two screws do not interfere with that. You don't want to hit that with your drill bit. Just double check, make sure you're clear. And I even mentioned earlier that in the lower or the thinner areas you can use staples. Now again, you want to let the staple stick out just a little bit, so you don't want to press real hard into the wood. Just kind of back off. I'm using an electric staple gun, but it doesn't matter. You could use a hand staple gun. And that just gives the thinner areas where you may not have enough depth to put a screw something to grab onto. And you can even use, as I mentioned, really fine or small finishing nails. Now you take a straight edge, any kind of a straight edge will work. You drag it over the surface, make sure that all the metal objects, screws, staples, nails that you put in are not protruding above that profile. When you buy the body putty, it comes with this large oversized cap on top, and when you open it, there will be the hardener inside. Lately they've been using white hardener, which I don't like. You see the color? Because the white and the light gray don't really show a different color when they mix, so you can't really tell when it's fully mixed. So I buy a separate tube of hardener. You see it's much larger. It'll last for several of these, and it's red. You can see the red color right through the clear cap, or the clear end there. And when you mix the two, the gray and the dark red, it turns into a pink. So you can actually get a visual of when it's fully mixed. All right, so you remember the ratio we talked about a golf ball size of the resin to about a dime size of the catalyst or hardener. It's maybe going to be a little bit more than a golf ball size, but I'm just looking at what we've got to fill here. And remember what we talked about it being a good epoxy. It does stick to itself. So don't worry about getting it perfect the first go round. You just want to get as much on there as you can. And that's a little more than a dime. Put the cap back on and mix it away. Now they always tell you to fold it kind of like a baker folds dough. I just as soon stir it. I don't whip it. They say not to whip it because you can get air bubbles, but I don't whip it that quickly. It's just the way that I like to. Now you can see the gray and the red and the pink streaks. That's showing how well it's mixing. You can't see that when you have white hardener. I don't know why they changed that color. I wish they changed it back to red. I'm certainly thankful that you can still buy red. You've got to move pretty quickly. The temperature in the air around you also determines how quickly it will harden. In the summertime, you'll notice it'll harden a lot quicker, and you'll end up with a lot of wasted putty because you can't use it. In the wintertime, it's much, much slower. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and put it on. Okay, now when applying, it's kind of sloppy at first. You can't really get artistic. You just try and pack as much in as fast as possible because you remember it is very time sensitive. Now I'm going to go ahead and pack it into the keeper hole all the way so that my drill bit won't jump around when I'm drilling it. And then at whatever point you find convenient, when you've got enough material to work with, you want to start generally shaping it. You're not going to get really, again, not really artistic yet. You're just smoothing it out to its general shape, which helps you maintain that line when you're sanding, and it speeds up the sanding process. Now here we use the painter's tape to help keep it from sagging and to also help us shape it and to keep that bead and that groove. And you can use a knife or your thumbnail and kind of work with it. You can't really do that when the tape's not in place. So at about the 10-minute mark, you'll notice it's dry, but it's still somewhat soft. So go ahead and take the tape off, and you can feel that heat from the curing process. And it's still soft enough to where you can actually begin to shape it with either a sharp chisel or a razor knife. And I like to do this before I sand because it takes that excess overburden or clumps of putty that you don't need off without kicking up all that dust into the air. And you could just shave it, shape it, and chisel it to get it to the general shape that you want. Okay, now at the point where I'm going to start sanding with sandpaper, I'm going to take two extra precautions. I'm going to put a respirator on, as you see, and I'm going to use a shop vac to suck up all that excess dust so I'm not kicking it up all over the house, and that picks it up very nicely. I use 100 grit sandpaper. It seems to be a good grit. It's not too coarse, it's not too fine, and I fold it in half to give it a nice sharp crease so that I can stay in those inside corners and maintain that groove right there and still hold that bead. Okay, now that we've finished our first phase of sanding, you'll notice some honeycombs or air pockets and some low spots. And as I said before, this stuff does adhere well to itself, so you can second coat it, third coat it, fourth coat it if you need to. Remember, I've been doing this for years, so shaping it's pretty easy for me. You may not get it the first go round. Don't be afraid to second coat it, and just go ahead and smooth it on like that and sand it again just like we did before. Up until this point, I've been using sandpaper by itself, but now I'm going to show you how to use a block. Now, this is actually a sanding sponge for sheetrock. You could use a sanding block. It could be wood. I just prefer a sanding sponge. It's a little bit softer, easier to use. And by using a block of any kind, you're actually maintaining that straight plane, number one. And number two, those right angles of the block can get inside the corners, the inside corners, and help you maintain those a little bit better, and that groove on the other side of the bead as well. And it gives you a smoother, flatter surface rather than just using your fingers with sandpaper. So this is more for your finishing. Okay, now we're ready to mark for our keeper plate. And this is where I had mentioned earlier to make sure that your screws are not in the way of any of this drilling or chiseling process. And that's the other reason why I packed that hole filled with body putty, so that hole, the drill wouldn't jump if it hit an air pocket when drilling the keeper hole. Now, one thing you'll notice about this product is it chisels and drills beautifully, much better than wood, because it doesn't have the irregularities of wood. The density is much more consistent. So we chisel out, install our keeper plate, make sure the door operates properly, take the keeper plate back off, and go ahead and apply our first coat of paint. And you can paint it with the same type of paint that you would use if you painted it the door jamb the first time, just a semi-gloss latex paint. And you can 1, 2, 3 coat it, whatever you want to do, but it takes paint the same as wood. Okay, so while the paint dries, here are some other uses for this product. Now, you remember I said you could use this product outdoors, and outdoors rot is a very common problem. Now, there's two things you want to be sure to do when you use it in an exterior application. Make sure that the wood is dry, let it dry out for several days, and prime it and top coat it before the weather gets to it. This will prevent that expansion and contraction that we talked about. Now, here's a kind of unusual application. This is an old wrought iron gate that had a mortise lock that had seized up. So we completely removed the old mortise lock, and we're going to take that mortise box right there and pack it with body putty. And then we'll drill it out to a standard 2 3/4 back set, 2 1/8 inch hole for a standard modern deadbolt lock. We'll go ahead and install the lock, spray paint everything flat black, and there you go. Now, that's a lot cheaper than hiring a welder to come out and completely remodify the gate for a whole new lock system. Now, this is a very common occurrence in a lot of homes with hollow core doors, particularly if you have boys who have flying baseball bats and hockey sticks. All you want to do is solidify that loose flap with a screw like I've done here. Once you get your first coat on, that'll hold the flap still. Then skim it a few more times, sand it, and paint it. Now, that is a lot cheaper than going out and buying a whole new door. And it's not just the cost of the door, it's your time to take the door off, to draft it, to sand it, to fit all the hardware, to move the hardware from the old door to the new door. Time is money. Keep your money in your pocket. This was a quick fix, as you can see, just as good as new. It's just a dowel hole that was recessed. I've used 2 nails here to give the body putty, again, something to grab onto so the chunk doesn't pop out when the door slams. And in this case, the customer wanted to go with a modern doorknob, so we got rid of the old mortise knob, filled the hole, and sanded it and started over.
Okay, so here you have the finished product. And I'm sure, as you could see by watching the video, all the many reasons why I like using this product instead of any other kind of solvent-based wood product, or even a piece of wood itself. To mortise out and put in a block of wood and chisel it and carve it and sand it, it would just take too long. It's not practical. I mean, this house is old, but it's not on the National Historic Register. It doesn't warrant that kind of effort and time. Time is money. You want to keep your money in your pocket. You want a quick, easy, durable application, real life applications, and this product is it. You can use it indoors and outdoors. It does have its inherent risks. You've got to remember to ventilate your house, wear a respirator, take precautions, lead test your wood, wear a respirator. All of these things are on you as the practitioner, okay? You've got to use your own common sense, take your risks into consideration, and mitigate those risks on your own. But this product is amazing to use. So I hope you found this video helpful. Hope you found it informative. And if you did, give it a thumbs up, please, and subscribe, and share it with your friends. Be sure to check back. There's going to be lots more videos for lots of easy, practical applications for you to repair your home. Thanks.
This video was created to assist you as a means to save money on basic home projects and repairs. It is provided free in the spirit of sharing professional knowledge and techniques. The methods demonstrated herein are merely opinions and are not the only way to perform any given task. The responsibility is on you to research your local codes, laws, or consult a professional before attempting any of these procedures. Any attempts at performing these tasks by you on any property are taken at your own risk. Any property damage or personal injury that may be incurred during your attempts to replicate the information provided herein are your responsibility alone. There are no warranties expressed or implied for the results of these techniques.